Thanks for listening to another episode of Off the Fence. We have a special guest, and some people are, when I have you here in a minute, say who you are and what you do for a living, people might be like, what are we about to talk about? But I think this is good. We think we need to have a conversation about end of life, death, and so I will let you introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, what you do for a living, and that might help people know what we're going to do.
Absolutely. My name is Jessica Lind. I am a funeral director for Kirk Funeral Home. I relocated about 9 years ago to do this job. I started in Sioux Falls with my apprenticeship and brought me here, and I've loved it ever since.
Cool. I don't tell a lot of people this, but if I weren't a pastor, I would love to be a part of funeral directing. I enjoy it. So thanks for what you do, by the way.
Thank you. Yep. And thanks for what you do, because actually funeral service is another form of ministry.
It is.
I mean, we have at least 3 employees at our funeral home that have actually more than that have come from church backgrounds.
Okay.
Yeah.
So very much
That makes sense. Yeah.
Well, let's get into this. Goal is, let's pull back the curtain a little bit, because I think some people, and you can tell me if I'm correct or not, it seems like some people are waiting until death happens around them to then begin to say, what should I do? How should we plan this? What should be a part of this service? Or what should we do a service? Or what do we do and all that? And so just your general take, are people coming in super pre-planned, or are they like, okay, no, this is kind of, we haven't really thought about this?
A little bit of mix of both, depending on the situation. The great thing is, with our funeral home, we do actually have a pre-planning department that handles a lot of these for us. As funeral directors, our main goal is to be there for families when they lose their loved one, what we call an at-need situation. The pre-need department handles that aspect of the pre-need or the pre-arranging. And having that department's so useful, because when someone calls in and they want to pre-plan their service, we send it to them, and they're the experts when it comes to, going through all the information on what we need for the death certificate, planning the service, and even pre-funding if you like to pre-fund.
Okay.
The great thing about our funeral home too, not all of them are like this, so I'm just speaking for us, is that we actually guarantee our prices from today. So if you were to today step in or come in, plan everything, we lock that in.
Wow.
For example, Kirk Funeral Home's been open since 1998, and we just did a service for someone that pre-planned in 1999.
Wow.
I know it doesn't seem that far for us, but when you think about it, it's over 20 years. The money they saved was incredible. Thousands of dollars.
Wow.
So, and people don't think of it that way either, but it is an investment. And it's a good investment to have.
It is. And so when if we wait until like someone's died, one, we've got the pain of all that we're walking through. But then in addition to, there's details and there's finances. And so you start to compound, a lot of stuff. And so that's why I want to have a conversation with you. So would you just talk about pre-planning? Like, so someone right now, let's say, well, I had never thought about pre-planning.
Yeah.
What would be some things they would be pre-planning and processing and need to think about with you, just so they get some sort of an idea of what is pre-planning?
Yes. So when you pre-plan, the first step is coming in to fill out what we call a record guide, emergency record guide. And what that record guide does is it just asks basic questions about yourself, things that we need for the death certificate. So what I mean by that is your name, your parents' names, your social security number, things like that we need to process the death certificate. Then there's a section on there you can fill out in regards to your background. When did you, or what'd you do for an occupation? What kind of education did you do? And then we also talk about the service itself. Because unfortunately, we notice a lot of times people don't like to talk about it, I
understand.
And so when families come in, and the very first question I ask them is your mom or dad, are they interested in having a traditional type burial or cremation? And if they can't answer that, I I feel really bad for them because that's a huge decision to make.
Yeah.
And, in the moment, they might have an idea, but then maybe later down the line, they might find out later that's not what their loved one wished.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's got to be heavy to have that on your shoulders, So, for example, cremations become very popular, as we know.
Okay.
Something to think about is if you have, say you have multiple children, and when you pass away, your children are responsible for signing off on the cremation. Well, in a perfect world, your children live all around here and get along. But in a realistic world, they don't. And so the issues of that become problematic because, now I've got to find these children that are scattered around the United States to get them to sign off on mom or dad's cremation. Or what if there's one of them that is immediately against it and now we can't do it, even though that's maybe what mom or dad wanted. But because of the legality of it, we can't go forward with it. So there is so much to it that most people don't understand. And with pre-planning, the great thing is if cremation is what you want, you can sign your own authorization.
So you resolve all that.
Exactly. Now we don't even have to.
What a gift.
Yeah.
Because there are so many families that we encounter that it's actually the death of a loved one that maybe begins the separation of family ties
absolutely.
so frequently. And I would think that in the moment of crisis and grief and stress that just catapults.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, it still happens where, you're going to have families that don't agree. But the great thing is when you write down your wishes and we execute those wishes, we're doing what's good for them, and we're hoping everything else is peaceful. But in the end, I mean, really, it just takes that stress and that the decision making out of it. And when I sit with it, just to give you an example, when I sit with a family that is not pre-planned versus that has everything pre-planned and prepaid, the anxiety and stress is huge difference between the two families. The ones that have prepaid, they walk out, they already or even when they come in, they already feel good because they know the decisions are already made. All they have to do is come up with the day and time of the service, and most of everything else is picked out and figured out. So
see, it's amazing because I think perhaps the not the lie, but the idea that we have is that by doing this, I'll lose all peace. Peace goes away. I don't want to mess with this. Where it's the opposite. If they would kind of process this again, that's why we're trying to pull this curtain back. Say, this is actually a gift of peace. This is a way to make that moment that eventually will comes for every one of us, that we will pass away, that we can give a gift even in that moment. Way back when we said we just planned some things out, not out of control, literally out of giving peace to where people could actually grieve, and that's all they've got to dwell on. It's not decision making. Is the grieving process. Okay.
And most of the time when I sit with families during our arrangement conference, after a death occurs, we have them come in for arrangements where we visit about all the details of the service. And a lot of times when they don't have anything pre-planned or they even don't talk about it, gosh, it's a struggle to even answer a basic question sometimes. And or I'll go to an unexpected death of even like a 70-year-old. I'll go to their house. Unfortunately, they passed away unexpectedly from, heart attack or whatever, and they can't even emotionally talk to me. I can't even get an answer on to what were his wishes. And that's usually my first question when I go into that situation is, what was, John Doe? What was his wishes for afterlife? And sometimes they can't answer it, and they won't, and they'll struggle with it for a long time. And when you think about it, I compare it a lot to weddings. Okay, with a wedding, you plan that out months ahead of time.
Do.
It's great.
Years even. I made a binder in middle school.
She did. Yeah, she did.
I had a lot of time on
Well, with even my wedding, I had 9 months to plan it, but I can't imagine coming in and we have less than a week to pull off this big event for them. And can you imagine, like, if you had to plan your wedding in a week, can you imagine all the things after the fact that you would be like, I wish I did this.
Yes.
For sure.
I wish I did that.
Yeah.
We feel like with funerals, it's the same way.
Oh, yeah.
Usually after the service is over with, they might have to come in to get the death certificates or get something else, and we'll visit with them. And they'll tell us, like, I wish I would have done this or would have done this differently. And a lot of it's just because they're not in the right headspace.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's a lot to carry too, because it's not yours.
Exactly.
And so there's this element of, did I really honor that person the way I wanted to? Which I think is I would say just not a good, like, get that thought out. But I can see where somebody might carry that.
Yeah.
And that would just complicate the grieving process even more.
Absolutely. And of course, I'm a big advocate for pre-planning, but even if you're not the type that you'd be surprised how many times I've had, a wife tell me, I've been wanting to do this.
Okay.
But my husband won't come in and do this with me because he doesn't want to talk about it, and that does happen. They just don't want to visit about it. I know, I'm in my late 30s, my husband's in his early 40s, and I know what his wishes are, and he knows what mine is. And I feel, we even have our wills done. I feel like it's super important to list that stuff down. So if tragically something happens to him, I know what he wants,
Instead of just whatever.
Well, So I know, based on my experience, a lot of people haven't thought about this, and they don't know what to expect. It's kind of like if you go to therapy for the first time and you're like, I don't know what they're going to ask me, and I don't know
it's scary
what it's going to be like. So let's kind of combat that right now together. What is a person going to need to process? Let's say they didn't get a chance to pre-plan. And so now they're coming to you, and they're in, let's just pull back and walk through. What are you going to walk them through? What's going to be? So they're coming to meet with you. What happens?
Yeah. So we visit about really their final resting place is huge. So my question to them would be whether they want a traditional type service with burial, casket, but here's another thing is you have to think about, well, where do you want to lay them to rest? Is it here in Rapid City? Are we going back to a hometown? Or are we going to the National Military Cemetery?
So those are options.
Those are all options.
Let's go. So you can, technically a person can say, I know exactly where, and it could not be, for in our case, in Rapid City. It's okay. Like it could be in a day. Okay, cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why we ask, because, Rapid City, it seems like it's very rare I get a death where they were born and died in Rapid City. You noticed that? We're all, even when we visited, we're not all from here.
No. Right.
So there are times where we'll do services here and maybe go out to Freeman, South Dakota or Murdo or someplace like that and do the burial. Or another thing that people don't think about is the snowbirds. You live here half your year, you go down to Arizona your other half. Well, what is the purpose of pre-planning if who knows if I die down in Arizona?
Right.
Well, pre-planning is actually, it'd be nicer if you had that done ahead of time, because that way there is ways to get you back here to do a service. Or, like with the policies that we sell at Kirk Funeral Home with our insurance policies, they are transferable, which is nice. So say that you decide to go to Florida and live down there. Well, that money is your money. It's not does not belong to Kirk Funeral Home. It belongs to you. So people can take their policies and go somewhere else. But even if they are snowbirds and they come back and forth, we just one phone call to us, we can do all the arrangements down in Arizona to bring them back here and do the services they want here. Because really, we need to know where is the final resting place.
Makes perfect sense.
And if it's not a burial, if it's cremation, well, that's fine too. But what are you going to do with mom or dad's ashes? And the reason I say that is because there's many times people have no idea what they're going to do, and they take mom and dad or brother, sister home, and then, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I do say, but what's going to happen when something happens to you?
Yes.
Right.
Because there are, every once in a while, you'll get those situations where people start, passing away, and then they start having sets of ashes in their home, and now they have to decide, am I going to bury? Am I going to scatter? Like there's so many decisions to be made that, and we have a list of like 100 different things you need to think about after a death.
Wow.
And the great thing is pre-planning eliminates so much of that list. So I can't imagine when a loved one comes in and they don't have anything taken care of, how much they have to still do after the fact.
So where you are laid to rest, or if you're cremated, like who is going to be in possession of those ashes.
Yeah.
Okay. So what else? What else do people need to, like, they're going to have to walk through with you?
And of course, the next step would be once we decide what kind of services they want, we look at location of services. Now, are we, mom and dad have a church affiliation, because that's huge, because we want to make sure we align everything with the church, as well as what day works best for us as well, and put everything together, or if they wanted services at the funeral home and what that looks like. Typically, we ask some of those questions before they come in so we can be a little more prepared and get the pastor involved in those scenarios. But then it's just, the small details of pallbearers, music, final resting place, luncheon. There's so much to a service that we have limited time to figure out.
Right. Yeah.
And sometimes availability is tough. And I know that, with our funeral home, we have been getting busier, and there's times where a lot of people, they might love, or want a certain day of the week. And unfortunately, we can't provide just because of our availability or the church's availability.
Right.
And, we make it work in the end, but it's one of those, it just would be nice if people really thought about this more. And, when they're in that state of mind of, oh my God, I just love, lost the love of my life, especially when it's a spouse situation, it seems like half the time they're not there, though they're there,
Just the shock.
Yeah. And I can tell when I'm visiting with them, I don't even think they listen to half the stuff I say. And I don't take it personally. Trust me. I just know that they are not emotionally present at the time I meet with them, And that's hard. That's very hard.
So I get asked regarding services when it comes to, whatever you want to call it, that we're now going to talk about things. We're going to read things or sing things or do things. I think there's a lot of folks who haven't been to a funeral lately for whatever reason, or they've attended not thinking about planning one. What are elements of a service that you've seen people find meaning in? You're going, oh, I can tell when someone does this or says this or plans this, it's meaningful. What should they consider?
One of the biggest things we've noticed lately, gotta love technology, is our slideshows. People love, it used to be those bulletins, people love the bulletins, and I think they're great keepsake to hold on to as well. But now it's our slideshows, where they have that time to go through all their photos, put something together for us, and we upload it and put it on our website, as well as make a DVD for them. And we play that during the service. Another thing would be is sharing. It's very powerful to have, that sharing part of the service, because especially for those families that do services at the funeral home and they don't have a pastor or minister to do it, and we get someone to help with that, kind of officiate. It's nice they don't know the person personally, so that's taken out a little bit. And having people go up and share stories, having that slideshow up there is huge for them. They do remember a lot of those parts.
Oh, for sure.
So yeah,
the visual.
Visual. Yeah.
When it's cathartic too, to kind of like relive that person, to be able to walk back through that person's life, and even just celebrate stories. And I think that's helpful in the grieving process anyway, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, my back in January, my husband's father passed away, and we did services up in Timberlake. And we had a priest because their family was Catholic, though we didn't do it at the Catholic church because he hasn't been part of the Catholic church in a while. So we did it at the community center there, and we still had the priest there. But so it was my first time since being a funeral director that I was actually in the audience. So I thought this was an interesting, just to think, what am I going to remember from this experience, or what was the highlights of the service? And as I was sitting there, first off, I realized how quick it went. I couldn't believe how we were already, it was a good half-hour service, which is pretty normal time, but I remember the stories, the stories that I've never heard, even my husband hasn't heard, from maybe the grandkids going up and talking about his dad, and it made us all feel really good.
I bet so.
Yeah. It was wonderful. It was a great service. So
doing some pre-planning is helpful.
mm-hmm.
The service part, pictures, stories.
Yes.
What other wisdom from experience? Because, when you think about it, I've got this, I'm thinking in my head mathematically, most people probably, I'm going to guess, 10 to 20 funerals they attend in a lifetime. You probably 10 to 20 eventual 1,000. I don't know how, but you've been.
Yeah.
So what other bits of wisdom, things we should be considering or is meaningful, whether it be for the actual event or maybe afterwards or before?
Yeah.
What's helpful?
It all depends on how they live their life. And what I mean by that is, let's give a veteran an example. We do a lot of veteran services.
Okay.
Something that's meaningful to them is maybe having an organization such as like the Legion Riders. That's an organization of bikers that are veterans themselves that come out and they stand guard in front of the funeral home or the church with their flags, and then they pretty much escort us to where the location is of the burial, which typically is National Cemetery.
Okay.
So we see a lot of that, and for example, I did one last month where he was a big snowmobile guy.
Okay.
And they brought in his snowmobile to the location of the service and had that on full display. And that was a big talking piece. And of course that was a way to honor him because that was his life, was snowmobiling. So, or motorcycles, of course, we have a lot of times they bring their bikes or even fancy cars in. They'll have that parked out front. And because, I know it's just an object to us, but to them, it's they're one of their pieces of their lives that were very meaningful to them. So, yeah.
What I'm hearing, and I've seen this, a funeral can be full of meaning and story and not avoiding we enjoyed this part of life with this person or this person was really big on a recent one. A funeral I was at. She was an avid, she was very active, but so there was some bike stuff in there and it was like, this and skiing stuff. And this was a part of her life. Yeah. But the family was able to display that and put that out in front. And it was meaningful. It wasn't, so sometimes I think we think that if we're going to put that in front of people, it's going to be so sad. We're missing that now. Yeah. No, it was the opposite.
Yeah.
It was like, no, this made this funeral special.
Yeah.
Because of the story behind it or the example.
Yeah. And kind of going to that bike, actually, it just made me think of another situation back in Sioux Falls. We had a death there, and she was a big biker. Okay. And so instead of, everybody driving to the cemetery, they rode their bikes behind the hearse or in front of the hearse, and they pretty much escorted the body all the way with their bikes. And I thought that was the coolest thing.
It is a way to
honor them. But it's for themselves too.
Yep. Yes.
Because I like to tell people, funerals are not really for the dead. Yeah. I mean, it's for the living. And that's why we want to make a meaningful service, because that's what they're going to carry and move on with.
And remember and celebrate. I think we've been to so many funerals recently that have been like, wear jeans because, that person's uniform was, they loved wearing jeans, or they loved this color or this team, or, and so much of that too is, I think, again, in celebrating the life of that person that meant something to us, but then also being able to do something to honor, but that helps us. I think it's so thoughtful.
And that's what we're seeing nowadays, is more of a celebration of life versus
funeral
seems like such a heavy word. So when you say celebration of life, it's definitely funner.
It is. And because I get asked the question too, like, what do we have to do? Like, as a pastor, for those listening, watching, they're going, well, what's the Bible say I have to do? Yeah. Well, actually, the Bible doesn't say a lot regarding funerals, what you have to do. Like a marriage, there's some things that need to be exchanged. There's a covenant. There's a, hey, this is, and there's even some legalities to it. With a funeral, it needs to be, how do you want to grieve? What do you want to celebrate? What do you want to emphasize? What do you want the value of that service to be? I've been at funerals where folks have made it what I would call a worship service, where there was a band and songs were sung. I mean, it was, and then there was even a sermon. And I remember meeting with one individual. He was a good friend of mine. He passed away, and he says, "I want this to be kind of like a church service." So we're like, "Okay, we will make it like a church service." And we even emphasized that during the funeral. This is what he wanted. This is what he asked, and so we're going to honor it in this moment. And it was special.
Cool.
That's why I can remember. You know, you've been doing enough funerals. Like, you remember that one.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so that's before we finish this. What about after the funeral is over? Is the person's relationship with you guys completely done? What happens?
That's a great question. Not necessarily. Actually, we have this beautiful lady named Susie. You guys know Susie.
We do. We love her.
She is our aftercare specialist. We call it aftercare.
Okay.
And what she does is she calls on the family. Usually it's a few weeks after the service and visits with them. And we have a list of materials to help with grief. A lot of it is just to maybe like groups that they can go to that can help them through their process. And she asks them if they would like these materials, and she mails it out to them and just visits with them. And great thing about she actually like looks at their obituary, she researches it, because she is part of the funeral sometimes, but there are times that she isn't, and she wants to be as well knowledged before she calls them.
Absolutely.
Nice.
And we want to make sure that these families know once we're done with the funeral, it's not over, because grief never ends. I mean, there was that beautiful quote I've always seen: grief doesn't end, it just changes. And that is very true. And another thing we do is at the end of the year, around Christmas time, we have a service of remembrance. That service is where we put these 2 giant trees in our chapel. I don't know if you've ever been there when we've done that.
No.
We keep it up pretty much right after Thanksgiving until the first of the year. And there are these trees that have ornaments of all the loved ones that we've honored and cared for over the past 20 plus years. And it's very powerful. And we invite those people, we invite everybody, but specifically we send invites to those that have lost their loved one this year, because this is the first Christmas they're experiencing without their loved one, and it's hard. Holidays bring us together. And so you have the invite we send them is it pretty much to put an ornament on the tree. And we keep that ornament on there. Sometimes people bring some really cool ones that, you know, Vikings, you know, something that resembles their loved one, or even a nice picture of them and to hang on the tree. And we keep them up every year. We put them right back on. And there are some people that have been coming for the last 20 years to this remembrance service. So. And we have invite a pastor to come in, say some nice words about Christmas, and we have some live music, and then we have like a visiting time afterwards, and we're able to see the families we've served that year and be able to check up on them and see how they're doing. And of course, when we reach out to them afterwards, you know, we let them know that, you know, we're here for them in any way. And we do encourage after that, if they, you know, if it's a spouse situation, maybe mom or dad can start looking at what, you know, if it's not pre-planned, well, why don't we consider pre-planning the other spouse? And, you know, so so there's different things that we do out there to keep them in our minds. So
that's incredible.
Well, thanks for helping us pull the curtain back on this.
Yes.
I know some people are going to bypass this episode, but hopefully return to it, you know, maybe in their time they want
when
to.
They're ready.
But I hope if you're watching or listening, that this does the opposite of what I think sometimes we treat it as, that it will bring you peace. It will give you a little bit of okay, I've got some stuff to do, whether it's Kirk Funeral Home or whatever funeral home of choice that you have, that you'd reach out and say, you know what, I'm interested in having a conversation, pre-planning and all that. And you being open, us trying to remove the taboo-ness, if that's a word, out of this. So thanks for giving us some time.
Oh, thanks for having me.
What you guys do, and I'll say this for personal experience, what you guys do, and you're not paying me for this endorsement. I'm just saying what you guys do is fantastic.
Thank you.
Yes.
I've been at many funerals, and every time that we're with you guys, and as you plan and do, you're definitely at the top of the list of the group that we love to send people to. You just really
Thank
care.
you.
You care for people.
Yes.
Yes.
So
I appreciate that.
thanks for what you do.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, if the conversation sparks something you need help, reach out to us. You can text us at 605-250-1224. But until next time.
I'm so impressed that he remembers that number.
No. Until next time, thanks for listening and watching. We love you very much.